every human being has desires. And we get gendered and coded for what desires we're allowed to articulate and which ones we are not. And so then these ideas of like real men or like a specific type of masculinity or real women or a specific type of femininity are the templates, and anything you do outside of that, whether or not we've divested from it intellectually, is still sanctioned socially.
Yes.
So then who you have access to as partners is coded along these lines, and what things you're allowed to express and with whom around your desires, like even the way you ask for what you want, the way you communicate your desires, all of these things have this gendered, sexist, heteronormative coding around them.
Will you speak a little bit more about that? Like give examples, because that's really interesting to me. I've never thought about even just like the desires or the needs that we're allowed to have, and then even in the way we communicate them. Can you speak more about that?
Yeah. Like and so there's an intersection of race and class around this too. So I don't want to leave all these pieces out, right? But so what I get coded as androgynous based on the way I look. And so people don't expect me to want softness or to be coddled or held. And people don't make room for that most of the time. And so when my husband's like, ask for that, I'm like, why would I ask for something that people don't think I expect or, should have, or like, why I've learned to give it to myself because of all of that coding, all of that, like there's a specific way Black women are gendered around that. Black women who like me are gendered. And so when I recognize that I have those needs and that I'm trying to take care of all of them myself, which isn't humanly possible because we're a collective, when I ask them, I feel incredibly vulnerable. And I also might still be socially sanctioned. Well, you're a strong Black woman. You need to act like this and be like this. And you shouldn't depend on a man for anything and all. And I'm like, but actually, I would like to in this particular situation. And so I think those pieces can get into it. So there are ways that in my community, based on being a Black girl who grew up in predominantly white areas, in a low SES family, all of these intersections, it's like, you really don't get to have any needs, and your responsibility is to take care of everyone else.
Yes. Oof.
And the men in my life who grew up in similar things are like, we don't really have very high expectations of you. So whatever you do is going to be regaled. You made it? Yeah, promising. It's amazing. But I think that looks different when you're white. I think that looks different, like the ideas of masculinity are based on like a white het patriarchal norm. And so it's like, for white men, I had this conversation on another podcast. He was like, I'm supposed to have this amount of money. I'm supposed to work. I'm supposed to be strong and have like maybe a few friends, but we shouldn't be that emotionally close to each other. And, I'm supposed to be tough. And, these are the tasks that I have in the household. And he was like, I might want more emotional intimacy than people give me access to. And if I ask for it from my friends, my male friends in particular, I am going to be shamed. Yeah. So those are some of the examples.
Yeah, even breaking it down to like the tasks that we have in the household, right? I mean, when you think about it like that, and like what you're actually socialized to believe and others are socialized to believe are your responsibility, what you should want, what you shouldn't want, what you're allowed to have, what you're not allowed to have. That's just so fascinating. I'm thinking about how like my point of overwhelm consistently, whether it's like personal life, friend life, work life, is always getting really overwhelmed with the production aspect, like producing all the things. So like the details and the execution and like juggling all the balls and spinning all the plates. And I'm good at it because I've had to be, but I hate it more than anything. And it's the thing that sends me into panic, overwhelm, frustration, resentment. I mean, all the things that I don't want to be, that's what sends me to that place. Yes. And as you were saying, that just clicked for me. Like there's something about also that's just been expected of me my whole life. Like this is what you do, right? This is what you should do. This is what you should be good at. So you don't get to say you don't want to, right? Or that you can't. It's just what you do, and it's been coded into us. And that is just like just, I don't know, there's something in that just clicked for me, because even outside of sex, just the way you show up in society has been coded into you, based on, to your point, like race, socioeconomic status, like all these things. Yeah. So interesting.
I had the example that I shared with y'all. So my husband is a chef and he's the person who cooks. And people are like, oh, you must be lucky. That is amazing. And I'm like, it is. I love it. Don't get me wrong. But if I were the person who were the chef and who cooked, nobody would be like,
To him.
look at this. Well, maybe some people in the manosphere would be like, it's rare to find a woman who cooks these days. But like that.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
people wouldn't be like my grandma's generation would work hours and hours in factories and then still make. And I'm like, how did you survive that? How did you survive making meals for people when you get home? I don't have energy for any of this. And so, those expectations, so we're still playing with those gender roles.
Yeah. And it's interesting because for me, there's a part of what is, carried forward from childhood is the codependency piece, because yes, we might have gotten messaging in positive reinforcement when we took on tasks, or not being needy and like being able to be the child that was able to take care of things ourselves. And so there was positive reinforcement, and that was what was internalized. But then what that carries into in adulthood, from my perspective, is a lot of times the way I maintain attachments, the way that I stay close to other people is by being pleasing, by doing these tasks, but then I carry resentment. And so for me, what I see so often with couples is when someone has like been in the space of attempting to meet the needs of others for so long, and they've been carrying resentment for so long, the transition into I can have needs, or I get to have needs, doesn't sound like a need. It sounds like a demand. And it sounds like a demand with resentment. And so for me, that's a little bit why with couples, especially, I play in the realm of desires, because it's like, I'm still responsible for the way that I'm showing up, and whether or not someone has the capacity to meet me, and they might not always in this moment, right? But that's information for me, right? Like I can make a request, but a lot of times it's like, I'm demanding this need be met right now.
And evaluating you based on your capacity to give me that, to meet that demand.
Yep.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's just such an adversarial energy that often comes into our relationships when it's like, no, I need my needs to be met. And so it's like the pendulum swings so far from I don't get to have any needs to I am demanding my needs be met. And I'm feeling a whole lot of resentment about the fact that I might not be having my needs met by this particular person in this particular way. You know what I mean?
Because that's another vulnerability avoidance strategy. So if I pop off on you about not meeting needs, I don't have to ask. Now I'm demanding, because that feels much less vulnerable than asking and giving somebody the ability to consent or not. That's why for me, it's tied to sexuality and how we express ourselves in so many ways. Because if you, like you said, if you express a desire for something and then you leave breathing room for a person to consent or not, you got to wait and listen to what they're navigating or negotiating as they decide whether they can consent. And then you've got to tolerate that rejection or whatever emotion comes up. And it's not actual rejection, but you're feeling whatever you're feeling around it. But if you demand, it's like you failed because you didn't meet my need. That's like really easy.
That was just like one of those like mic drops.
Yes.
I am obsessed with what
I'm just speaking what I live. So I
mean, shit.
Speaking
I'm
my
like,
own shit.
I hope everybody rewind that, write that down. That was potent.